after I started working short-term jobs outside the home, Jack started complaining and going alone to my step-parents' ramen noodle shop for dinner. I went to check on him. To my surprise, I overheard an extraordinary conversation held between Jack and his parents, who seemed not to notice my presence at the front door. I overheard the conversation between Jack and his parents. "Oh my God, Kate, she is such a klutz, and now she is working part-time and staying at work until this late? She is a terrible person, she can't do anything and she leaves her husband alone. I wish she'd never come back home at all." Jack mentioned a woman's name in response to his parents' words. "Yeah, I really think so. I want to remarry Rachel. I wish I never had to go back to that wife of mine." I wondered who Rachel was. I thought I heard a faint young woman's voice. "Don't joke about it, Jack." I quietly left the place and went back home, packed a bag for myself and my son Daniel, and quietly left the house. My destination was my parents' house. Then, after consulting with my father, I decided to carry out my revenge against Jack, who was about to leave me and remarry a young woman. My name is Kate. I am a 40-year-old housewife who has been married for 16 years. Once I graduated from college, I got a job, but during my first year with the company, my father introduced me to a man from his business partner and we got married. I am the only daughter, but my parents never wants me to remain at home. My mother died when I was in high school, and I felt that I could not leave my father alone. My father, however, hoped that I would be independent once I got married. I can cook anything because my mother taught me when she was still alive. So, to fulfill my father's wish, I made up my mind to be a good wife when I get married. My husband, Jack, who is 3 years older than me, has parents who run a ramen noodle shop. His parents have no intention of letting Jack take over the business. Since that was the case, I hope to build a happy family with Jack. Such a seemingly dreamy newlywed life started, but one day, I received a phone call from my stepmother. "Kate? I'm sorry, but could you help me with the restaurant tomorrow?" "What? Starting tomorrow?" "Yes. Suddenly one of our employees quit, and we are running short of staff. You are a housewife. You have time, don't you?" Although I hesitated at the suddenness of the situation, my stepmother's words made me feel bad. I certainly had time to help out, but her tone of voice made it sound as if I had nothing to do. I was about to refuse, but Jack, who happened to be listening to the call behind me, said, "Go help out. I'll be working late every weekday anyway. You would be bored staying home alone, wouldn't you?" What do he and his parents think housewives are? However, if I didn't go to help her, it would be a problem. I wanted to argue with her, but I decided to help my step-parents the next day. However, the ramen shop was busy during the daytime. My step-parents and I were the only 3 people in the restaurant, and we even took delivery orders. While my stepfather was going out for delivery, my stepmother cooked and I mainly served customers and washed dishes. I was always exhausted by the time I finished work. And yet, my step-parents, perhaps because they were used to it, put on a cool face and looked at me condescendingly. "Kate, you're still young, but you're really no good at all." Well, it's like this for all young people nowadays. They've been spoiled and left everything to their parents. Hearing their sarcastic words, I felt even more tired. It's not that I wanted them to thank me for helping them, but at least a few words of exertion would be nice. For me, there were still chores to do when I got home. Although I would finish preparing dinner before my shift in the ramen shop, after I served dinner to Jack and finished washing the dishes, my fatigue had reached its peak to the point where I could no longer move. But something was not right. I certainly felt more tired than before. Was it because of the unfamiliar work? On Mondays, when the restaurant was closed and I could take a day off, I cleaned places that were usually out of my reach. When the weather was nice, I hung the futon out to dry and weeded the garden. Since I had just gotten married, I didn't want to cut corners on housework, so I kept moving as much as time allowed. Up until now, I would have been fine with this much physical activity, but I still felt dizzy. Then, another month passed. I was helping my step-parents with their restaurant as usual when I felt myself getting dizzy and lightheaded. However, the store was busy at that time of the day. Both of my step-parents were working so hard that I could not say that I was not feeling well. Meanwhile, I kept making mistakes in my order and giving the wrong change at the cash register. In the end, when I felt so lightheaded, I ended up knocking over a bowl of ramen I was carrying. That day, I made too many mistakes. After work, my step-parents looked at me with dismay. "Why did you keep making mistakes today? I don't want a wife who can't do her job properly coming over here anymore." "Well, you knocked over the whole tray in front of the customers. If you keep doing this, they may stop coming." "I'm so sorry." I apologized to my step-parents, but I was still so dazed that I couldn't even hear their voices. I still wonder if I should have made it clear that I wasn't feeling well, no matter how busy I was. Still, there was no need for them to say that much to me. With this thought in mind, I returned home. After a good night's rest, I was still not feeling well the next morning. That day, Jack left home early for a morning meeting. I had no choice but to go to a nearby clinic by myself to see a physician. I found out that I was 3 months pregnant. It seems that my recent illness was morning sickness. Come to think of it, I had no appetite these days, or perhaps I had an aversion to the smell of food. I had been so busy with work that I had not noticed it. That night, when I told Jack about the pregnancy, he looked happy. "I see. That's great. Well, Kate, now that you were fired from our ramen shop, you can stay home and raise our child at home." It was nice of him to be happy, but the way he said I had been fired from the restaurant was irritating. However, from the beginning, I wanted to concentrate on housework and child rearing after marriage. So I didn't say anything back to avoid causing any more problems. This time, I'll be able to go back to my ideal marriage. Then I gave birth to a boy and named him Daniel. Jack said he would work harder than ever for the sake of the newborn, and he worked even more overtime. The truth was, I would like a little help with childcare while Daniel was little, but I couldn't complain to my husband who worked hard for the family. I decided to do my best on my own for Daniel's sake, even though I would be raising the child by myself, without my husband's help. However, my step-parents came to see us on their occasional holidays. I understood that they wanted to see their adorable grandchildren, but every time they came, they said something sarcastic. "Kate, I am envy of you. You are a company employee's wife, so all you have to do is take care of your baby. I had to carry Jack on my back while working at the restaurant when he was a baby. You are happy because Jack is well capable. We both worked very hard to get him through college. We didn't force him to take over the restaurant, letting him do what he wanted to do. So Kate should be a little grateful to us. My step-parents always had a way of making a point, but it was hard for me to deny any of it. All I could do was just say, well, that's true. They came in almost every Monday, ruining what was supposed to be a fun marriage. As Daniel got older, he began to show his displeasure at the visits of my sarcastic step-parents. So, when he started to go to elementary school, Daniel wanted to do extracurricular activities. Surely, that would eliminate my step-parents' visits. We then decided to send Daniel to a weekly swimming school. At first, that spared him from my step-parents' visits. But then, I don't know where did my stepfather got the idea, but he called me on my phone. I was wondering what's going on with you lately, since you're not home when I go there at the time Daniel comes home from school, and I see that he's started swimming. If that's the case, I'll pick him up and drop him off, and, Kate, you do your chores in the meantime. That would help you a little, wouldn't it? I almost sighed. Thankless is exactly what I mean. I know it's futile, but for Daniel's sake, I was going to say no. No. It's your occasional day off, so you might as well take it easy. Anyway, other parents from school would be coming and we have some chats. I'll take him to his lessons. But that did not go over well with my stepfather, who was determined to take his grandson to his extracurricular activities. Oh, don't worry about it if it's your parents' friendship. The parents sending their kids to the same swimming school are regular customers at our restaurant. So we can handle it better than you do. I had forgotten. My step-parents, because of their business, were well known in the area and knew people everywhere they went. I thought about changing the day of swimming lesson, but then my step-parents would come over to our house again on Monday and ask why we changed the day of the week. We had no choice but to tell Daniel that his grandfather would pick him up and drop him off. Daniel looked disapproving, but like me, he was always looking to see how his grandparents look at him. So, when I told him what was happening, he agreed. Then, for a while, the days continued to be ordinary and uneventful. Then, after 16 years of marriage, Daniel was about to enter the 9th grade. Daniel wanted to go to a private high school, and I was thinking of going to work soon. When I discussed it with Jack, he responded, "Then why don't you help out at our ramen shop? My dads are old now. And it looks like they only have one young part-timer now." What? But I still had a hard time with my step-parents. Although they did not come over to our house much in the past few years, when I saw them in some occasions, they still called me a bored housewife. Perhaps sensing my feelings, Jack added, "I know you are not getting along with my parents. But I don't think it's a good idea for you to stay that way forever. There will come a time when we will have to take care of them at home." Well, that may be true. To be honest, I was horrified to think about the future, but that was just the way it is. I visited my step-parents anyway, as I was told, and asked them to let me help them again. However, my step-parents just frowned. "What? I didn't ask you to help me." "Oh. We have a young, well-able part-time employee, so we don't need your help anymore," So get out of here. Just as how it had been before, I was still treated badly. I had no real desire to help, so I simply said, "Yes, I understand." I left the place as soon as I said it. When I returned home and told Jack about it, he looked at me as if it were a matter of course and said, "I knew it." "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, no, it's nothing. Something is wrong." I wondered if Jack was hiding something from me. I was curious, but I thought it was nothing important anyway, so I started looking for another part-time job the next day. I was lucky enough to find a job opening at a nearby deli, and was hired immediately. However, when I started working there, I found that most of the employees there had small children and elderly people in their homes who needed care. Whenever something happened, they would take a sudden day off, and I, with my flexible hours, would be asked to fill in for them. I myself had experienced raising children, and my mother was a caregiver for my grandmother, so I knew how they felt. I knew what it was like to be asked to do something on behalf of someone else. As I was forced to fill in for various people, I began to neglect my home. Worst of all was working on weekends. When I came home, Jack, who was home on his day off, always stared at me. "It's only a part-time job, but you couldn't even balance it with housework." "I'm sorry, I'm always late. I'll start preparing the meal right away." "You don't have to. I'm going to go to my parents' ramen restaurant, so you can just relax by yourself." Then he got up, and immediately left the house. Every week, every vacation, it was always the same. At first, I used to bring home meal boxes from the deli where I worked, but Jack soon got tired of eating them and began to refuse them. Now that I was alone, I was no longer bothered to cook, and a slice of bread is all I had for dinner. Still, it was good because, at least, Jack was home when I returned. After a few months in this state, when I came home from my part-time job on weekends, Jack was already gone. I figured he was probably at the noodle shop again anyway, so I headed there to just say hello. I came to the front of the restaurant. But even though it was 6:00 p.m., there was the "close" sign still hanging. As I approached the door, I could hear Jack and my in-laws inside. "Oh my God, Kate, she is such a klutz, and now she is working part-time and staying at work until this late? She is a terrible person, she can't do anything and she leaves her husband alone. I wish she'd never come back home at all." "Yeah, I really think so. I want to remarry Rachel. I wish I never had to go back to that wife of mine." Jack and my step-parents are laughing at each other while speaking ill of me. Wait, I thought I heard another voice. Young woman's laughter. Then Jack said something outrageous. "Yeah, I really think so. I want to remarry Rachel. I wish I never had to go back to that wife of mine." Ha ha ha. Really? I'd be happy to have Rachel as my daughter-in-law too. I wondered who Rachel was. I thought I heard a faint young woman's voice. "Don't joke about it, Jack." She is calling Jack familiarly. I wondered if Jack's parents also showed favor toward her. Come to think of it, my stepfather said there was a young, well-able part-time employee. Maybe he was talking about Rachel. Was that why Jack often went to his parents' restaurant? I quietly peeked inside through the door. Jack and Rachel were laughing together. They seemed to be in a friendly relationship. I wanted to go inside to find out what was going on, but I knew that if I went in, I would only feel alienated. I felt so helpless that I had no choice but to quietly leave the place. I was about to leave my step-parents' house and head back to my house. That's when I heard, "Mom." I turned around to see Daniel behind me. "What's wrong, Daniel? You're going in the complete opposite direction from the cram school." "Yeah, I was coming back to the front of the house, but you came out with a kind of gloomy look on your face, so I followed you." I didn't notice that I was wearing such a gloomy expression on my face. I felt kind of disgraceful, but it was not the time to be talking about that. I was worried that Daniel might have heard what I had just heard. I wanted to check, but as I was wondering how to broach the subject, it was Daniel who spoke up first. "Anyway, Mom, are you okay? I heard what Dad and the others were talking about earlier." I was listening from a distance. Oh my God, he heard that. I knew my son would not want to hear that his father was getting along with a young woman and that he wanted to remarry. I didn't want my son to hear that. "I'm sorry. It's your mother's fault for making you listen to all this weird stuff." "No, I'm fine. I knew all about that." Daniel's words stunned me. Then Daniel told me in detail how he came to know about Jack and Rachel's friendship. I heard that Jack had brought his parents and Rachel to our house while Daniel was on summer vacation and I was working part-time during the day on Saturdays and Sundays. They had ordered catering sushi, which was too expensive to have for lunch, though it seems their stay in our house was only during the break time of the restaurant. Since they run a ramen shop, why would they go to the trouble of taking sushi at our place when they could just eat at the restaurant's inclusive meal? Daniel told me that apparently my step-parents were trying hard to get Jack and Rachel to remarry, so they were serving Rachel. He also said that they were even discussing how to get me divorced. I couldn't believe they were having such discussions in front of Daniel. I sighed deeply, wrinkling my brow at how insane this family was. Furthermore, Jack and his family had told Daniel to keep quiet about this to me. But you know what? Now that you have heard about it, I don't have to worry about Dad and the others anymore. I got to tell you, I'm on Mom's side. Just saying that was a great relief to me. But anyway, I couldn't let Jack off the hook without a fight. I went home once and promptly packed myself and Danielle's belongings and left the house. The destination was my parents' house. First, I would tell my father about my day. In wanting to leave me and be with a young woman, Jack seems to have forgotten something crucial. I have discussed that and more with my father. My father listened to me seriously and made a certain suggestion. First of all, we need to find out more about the relationship between Jack and that part-time worker. And seeing the result, if you want to break up with him, I have a good idea. I asked him to explain the details of his plan and it seemed he would give Jack a severe sanction about what Jack had forgotten. This way, I could get back at Jack for betraying me and trying to get with a young woman. Once that was decided, I would get to work. First, to find out what kind of relationship Jack and Rachel actually had, we asked a private detective agency to gather evidence. But still, Jack must be surprised right now because I left the house without saying anything, taking Daniel with me. Sure enough, during the night, I received an unending stream of texts from Jack on my phone. I had also received an incoming call earlier, but I had ignored it. As I kept ignoring his messages, he texted me, "You ignored me enough," and I didn't hear from him again for a while after receiving that message. For the next 10 days or so, I really didn't hear from him. In any case, I guess he took Rachel into his house, taking advantage of my absence. I had the detective agency check out their relationship, and it turned out to be a total fling. However, on the day after 10 days, I received a series of calls from Jack again. I reluctantly picked up the phone, thinking that the calls would persist even if I ignored them any longer. Jack was shouting at me from the beginning. Where are you now? You've been neglecting me for 10 days. Now get home and do the laundry and cleaning that's piled up." I was wondering what he was going to say. But he was just urging me to do the chores. Aside from me, I had been gone for 10 days with Daniel. Wasn't he worried? I was appalled and retorted, "Why don't you just have your beloved Rachel do the cleaning and laundry? She's with you anyway, isn't she?" "What? What are you talking about out of the blue? First of all, how did you know about Rachel?" Jack was about to say that, but then he panicked and clammed up. He then made no attempt to say anything back. He was probably flustered at the thought that his relation with Rachel had been found out. Well, at least, I go home to clean up. I have to go home anyway. I've got some things I need to take care of. What? What do you need to take care of? That's for when I get home. That's all I told him, and I ignored Jack saying, Hey, and I quickly hung up. And on the following day, I, together with my father and Daniel, returned to our home for the first time in a long time. When I opened the front door, Jack was standing there in a daze with a dark look on his face. But his expression changed to one of surprise when he saw my father enter from behind me. Why is your father with you? Why not? This house was built in my father's name. That's why we're here to go through the procedures to dispose of it. What do you mean, dispose of it? It seemed Jack wanted to ask for more detail, but I ignored him and went inside the house. But as soon as I saw what was inside, I gasped. My expectation was that Rachel would come up to the house and, at least, clean it up somewhat. I had expected Rachel to come into the house and do some cleaning. Surprisingly, however, when I entered the house, I found that it had not been cleaned for days, and things were scattered everywhere. There was a pile of laundry around the washing machine. You know what? It seemed that you thought I was cheating on you, but there is nothing feminine here, isn't it? Jack spoke as if he was truly innocent. After all, he didn't invite Rachel to his house because he didn't know when I would come back. It seems that Jack had also thought it through so that I wouldn't get any evidence of the affair. But Jack has not yet realized that it was too late for that. I already had proof of the affair. Then, unluckily, uninvited guests arrived. The doorbell rang. Jack, that wife of yours hasn't come back yet anyway, has she? I've come for cleaning up with Rachel. Oh. If you want, Rachel is your wife from today. If that old wife of yours comes back now, send her away. At the loud voice of my stepfather, Jack opened his big mouth and inhaled all at once with an awkward expression on his face. instead of Jack, who went pale and slumped down as he was. I went to the front door. "Hi, your son's old wife is here." Kate. What are you, sneaking back now? My step-parents and Rachel, next to them, also looked surprised. Then Jack came reluctantly out from behind me. "Mom, don't come here at this unwelcoming occasion. Your timing is totally off." Jack looks aghast, having gone to the trouble of destroying the evidence so that I wouldn't find out anything. His parents, perhaps unaware of the situation, were not concerned, but said what they wanted to say. "What timing is bad? It's just because your wife suddenly took your son and ran away in the night. You can just give her a clear divorce already." That's right. Jack should be with Rachel. My stepfather patted Rachel on the shoulder as he was speaking. When my father appeared, he and Rachel, completely taken aback, instantly looked at each other. But at the next moment, my father smirked and spoke to Rachel. "So, it was you who was having an affair with Jack? It's been a long time, Rachel." President. The reactions of these two people caused a commotion around us. I, however, was trying hard to hold back the urge to burst out unintentionally. Jack noticed me and looked at me with a frown. "Kate, what's so funny?" Because I knew all about it, because I had the detective agency check out all of Rachel's background. It's just the right time for me to tell you all about it here. I then told him about Rachel's background, which I had the detective agency check out. Rachel had entered my father's company after graduating from junior college, but left after 6 months. The reason for this was her bad taste in men. My father once told me this story. He told me that a young female employee who had just entered his company had approached him several times. However, my father, who is a firm man and hates to be crooked, was not happy about her insistence on a relationship with him as her boss. He thought it inexcusable. He was so angry that he fired her. The detective agency found out that that female employee was Rachel. After being fired from the company, Rachel has been working part-time and moving from job to job. However, she was not able to make a living by herself. She kept approaching middle-aged men who looked wealthy enough. I thought that Jack was probably one of them. However, it was not Jack who Rachel first approached, but to our surprise, his father. His ramen shop once had a good reputation in the area as a place where people would wait in line to eat there. So, Rachel got a part-time job at the restaurant, and then, stealing his wife's eye, she began to beg him for pocket money. When I told her this, my stepmother's face suddenly turned red. "Wait a minute. Is that true? By the way, ever since Rachel came in, you've been staying out sometimes when the restaurant is closed, haven't you?" "No way. You were having an affair." No, you misunderstood. Rachel just asked me to stay with her because she was lonely. And My stepfather tried to explain himself in a hurry. However, his excuse seemed to dig his own grave, and his wife's anger reached its peak. "I knew you were having an affair. I thought it was strange that you, a staunch man, call her by the first name so casually." She grabbed her husband by the neck, and there was no way to stop her. But I left my step-parents and continued with what I had just been talking about. When Rachel was still making advances to Jack's father, Jack started going to his parents' house to eat ramen noodles. This is just my guess, but it was then that Jack began to take a liking to Rachel. When I mentioned this, Jack looked down as if he was trying to avert his eyes from me. I knew I had hit the nail on the head. That was why Jack responded weirdly when I told him that his stepfather had told me that he didn't need me because he had a well-able part-time worker. Later, taking advantage of my coming home late from my part-time job, Jack began to visit the ramen shop more frequently. Then Rachel found out that Jack was an office worker who made good money and switched from his stepfather to Jack. The detective agency's investigation also revealed that the two then started dating. I laid out the photos the detective agency took on the table. All of them showed Jack and Rachel walking in and out of the hotel arm in arm. In addition, there were several other photos of the two hugging in a friendly manner. I also showed him a picture of Rachel arm in arm with his father in the backyard of the ramen shop, begging for something. It seems that even after she started dating Jack, she had been flirting with his father to some extent. Jack frowned at the picture of his father and Rachel. Maybe he wanted to say, "What the hell do you think you're doing at a good age?" My stepfather looked away awkwardly in response. So, I dared to confirm the truth to him. "You want Rachel to be your son's wife because you want to keep her by your side anyway, right?" Yeah, sort of." In response to his reaction, my stepmother hung his head in shame. Well, they had been a couple for many years, so if this was the extent of the problem, it would cool down in time. With that in mind, I looked at Jack and continued talking in order to get a clean slate. "Anyway, this is all the evidence I have that Jack has been cheating on me since before he and I were divorced. So, if you are to divorce me, I'll make sure you pay me alimony for the affair." Jack nodded quietly at my words. "I don't have a choice. If that's how I can get a divorce and remarry Rachel, I'll at least pay you alimony." "Really? I heard that alimony for cheating is quite a lot of money. Are you sure you can afford that? You don't even know what will happen to your company." "What? What does that mean?" Seeing Jack's surprised expression, my father and I grinned as we looked at each other. Now, this is where my father came in. My father's expression changed from the one he had had earlier. Suddenly his expression went into one that he wore in work and he told Jack an important thing. "Have you forgotten? For the company you work for, our company is the #1 supplier. And that I introduced my daughter to you and got her married because of our business dealings." Oh. You don't mean? "No, President." "Yes. If you divorce me, my father says he will stop doing business with your company." Jack's face turned completely pale. No wonder. For Jack's company, the loss of business with my father's company would be a fatal blow. Jack is now the vice president of the company. Just imagining what would happen to him in the future must be horrifying. Then Jack got down on his knees on the spot. "I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm breaking up with Rachel and I'm deeply sorry. Of course, I won't cheat on her at all in the future, so could you please pretend that the divorce never happened?" "Oh, come on. If you're talking about cheating, you have the wrong person to apologize to, don't you?" My father retorts with a dumbfounded look on his face. Jack probably had no remorse for what he had done. he must have bowed his head to protect his company. And there was no way that our relationship would ever be restored. Then, Daniel, who had gone to the back of the room so as not to get involved in adult conversations, appeared. "Dad, stop it. No matter how low you bow, there's no way Mom will forgive you. And I'm going with Mom." Daniel. Jack felt that even his son had abandoned him, and his face turned even paler in shock. But that was not all. Rachel, who had been silent until then, was also looking at Jack with a dubious expression. "Jack, is what you said earlier true? You said you were breaking up with me. You said we would be together forever. You lied," Rachel said and walked out crying. She didn't even hear Jack yell, "Wait a minute." I was going to get a fee for the affair from her, but it seemed like she was deeply hurt, so it was kind of heartbreaking to do so. Jack was bawling his eyes out on the spot. However, I felt no sympathy for Jack and proceeded to discuss the divorce with my father present, not caring. And I was able to get Jack and his parents to agree to prepare and sign the divorce papers at a later date. Things went exactly as my father had suggested. Then, Daniel and I returned to my father's house. On our way home, I thanked my father. "Dad, thank you so much. I think I'm going to be able to get a clean break from Jack and my step-parents." "Well, that's great, but you're a bad person, too. I can't believe you knew about Rachel and hid it from even me." "I'm sorry, Dad. Jack was having an affair with that girl who was coming on to you. I was afraid that if I told you, you would say you didn't want to see her." My father frowned, as if to say, "Well, I guess." It was Black History for my father, who was a hard man, so I had no choice. Anyway, thanks to my father, everything was resolved. I really want to thank him. And after the divorce was successfully finalized and the alimony paid, Jack left home as promised. I thought he had gone back to his own parents' house, but seemingly it was not the case. In fact, recently, as I passed by my former step-parents' house, I saw a sign on the ramen shop that said it was closed. I asked one of the regular customers who happened to be passing by, and he told me that my ex-step-parents had fallen out completely, and that it had affected the restaurant's sales as well. The restaurant had a reputation for good taste, but most importantly, for the loving couple enjoying attending customers. Even that well-famed taste had completely declined, probably because the chef, my ex-stepfather, was being irritated. And the restaurant continued to lose money and was forced to close. When I drew closer, I noticed that my ex-step-parents' house itself was vacant. Where had they gone? As I was wondering, I received a call on my phone from my ex-stepmother. When I answered, my ex-stepmother was almost crying and told me the current situation. After my ex-stepparents lost their job, they tried to move into Jack's place, where lived alone. However, Jack's company, which was no longer doing business with my father's company, was no longer viable and had gone bankrupt. So, she asked me if I could convince my father to do something about Jack's company. However, even my father would not be able to do anything about a company that had gone bankrupt. When I told her this, she cried even louder and exclaimed, "Oh, no. We are now 4 people huddled together in a small, old apartment. How can we live like this?" 4? Who is the other one? That's Rachel. That one. I thought she was gone once, but she couldn't find any job and was kicked out of her place of residence, so she came back to Jack's place. Birds of a feather flock together. I couldn't stop laughing. To be honest, I was still wondering whether I should file a claim against Rachel for cheating on me, but I decided not to do so. Rachel had already fallen as far as she could go, so there would be no need. Well, since there are 4 grown-ups there, why don't you take care of it yourselves? Well, I'm busy, so I'll leave you to it. Oh, no, wait a minute. She was still sobbing and complaining. But I didn't want to get involved any further, so I quickly hung up the phone. I then blocked all contacts regarding my ex-step-parents and Jack. So, I would never hear from that family anymore. I have lived with Daniel since then. I sold the house I was living in with Jack and moved into a new apartment, so I no longer have to worry about Jack or my ex-step-parents barging in on us. Daniel has successfully been accepted into the school of his choice. Although we were now a single-parent family, we could now take advantage of the tuition-free system for private high schools. I also continue to work part-time at the lunchbox shop, and as usual, I have to work long hours to cover for employees who take a sudden leave of absence. My father also helps us to some extent, so Daniel is able to devote himself to his studies and club activities without worrying about financial issues. Furthermore, when Daniel and I visited my father's house, Daniel said, "I'm going to go to my grandfather's company in the future. So I'm going to study hard and go to a national university." My father seemed really happy to hear that. I see. Then, Grandpa will still live long enough for Daniel to enter the workforce. Daniel is a true hard worker. I am proud that he has grown up to be a vigorous son. To live up to Daniel's filial piety, I will work even harder. With this in mind, I went out to work hard again today.